Are you hoping to become a better investor, business person, or entrepreneur? Well, today's episode of the Michael Yardney Podcast is for you because we're going to be discussing 18 wealth lessons from Morgan Housel's great book, The Psychology of Money. Now, this is not one of your, this is the next property hotspot or how to spend less than you earn episodes. It's discussing this great book, which is about the concept of behavioural finance, which is the study of the effects of psychology on investors and financial markets. Hey, but don't worry, it's not woo-woo stuff, it's not technical. Instead, I share several of the chapters of his book. Morgan Housel's actually my favourite author, with Mark Creedon, and we'll try and explain why investors often appear to have a lack of self-control, act against their own best interests, make decisions based on personal biases rather than facts, why investors get it wrong, because if you understand that, you're more likely to get it right. So wherever you are in your investment journey, I'm sure today's show will give you some insights, as you're probably twice as biased as you think. Hey, and if you don't think this applies to you, you're probably 4 times as biased as you think.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney Podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment, and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect, and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now, here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
One of my favourite authors is Morgan Housel, and I've learned a lot from his blogs and his great book, The Psychology of Money, because I believe this book offers great lessons for all investors, for business people and for entrepreneurs. I'd like to share my thoughts about it with you and over 2 podcasts with Mark Creedon, founder of Mastermind Business Accelerator, who's business coach to many successful Australian business people and is now the CEO of the Metropole Group of companies. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Michael.
Now, Mark, the premise of this book is that doing well with money has actually got very little to do with how smart you are, but it's a lot to do with how you behave. And we've discussed this concept of behavioural psychology, of the psychology of money in previous chats. And I guess what Morgan Housel was telling us is that financial success isn't a hard science. It's really more a soft skill, the psychology of money. So what I'd like to do is just give you the premise of each chapter, and then we can just break it down, and I'd love to get your thoughts and I'll give you mine.
Perfect. That sounds great. Sounds like a bit of fun, actually.
Well, the first chapter is about the concept that your personal experience with money probably makes up 0.0001% of what's happened in the world, but your personal experience probably makes up about 80% of the way you think how the world, and in particular money and finance, works.
Yeah, it's interesting, Michael, and you, in your experience, would have seen this more than most people. I think that, every decision people make with money is kind of justified, isn't it?
They're not crazy to us. No. When you look from the outside, you think, boy, they're crazy, but they're doing what they think is right.
They are. They plug it into their unique mental model, I think. But the other thing is that, I was having this conversation with a dear friend just last night, in fact, that people from different generations, raised by different parents, earn different incomes, have different values, on different paths in the world, born into different economies. There's so many differing factors, isn't there, that helps kind of dictate what is people's reality when it comes to what they do with their money.
Yes. Having said that, in theory, you should be able to make your investment decisions, whether it's property or any sort of decision, based on your goals and the characteristics of the investment options. Just look clearly and see, hey, clearly that's the right thing and this one isn't. But it doesn't really work that way. That's not what people do. And I guess that's why most property investors fail. We keep saying that. 50% end up selling up in the first 5 years, and more recently it's been shown that many are selling up even within 3 years' time by CoreLogic's Pain and Gain report. And of those who stay in the property market, very few of them, less than 8%, end up with more than 2 properties. In other words, they don't achieve what they want to achieve, while there are ways of doing it. All you've got to do is copy that small group of people who do achieve it. So people are just stuck in their own way of thinking. They've got these biases that I guess we've talked about before.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I think few people actually make financial decisions purely with a spreadsheet. Michael, I guess that one of the things that our strategists talk about at Metropole is, in fact, not to make those decisions purely based on a spreadsheet, because there's so much more local market knowledge, understanding, one side of the street versus the other, etc. But I think people tend to make these decisions at dinner tables or around barbecues, or places where your own unique view of the world feeds into the narrative that you think works with you. And it probably goes to show the great value in some independent, known, proven, trusted advice.
I guess so, but you've also got to have the perspective to see the patterns in the chaos that's out there in the world at the moment. So yes, data is important, but as we've mentioned in the past, property investment is part art and part science. You can almost make the data say anything you want. And that's, again, based on your preconceived views of money, what you saw from home or what you saw your parents do or what you've seen your friends do. So the first chapter was that your personal experience really has very little to do with how the world of money works. Be aware of that. Now, the second chapter was quite interesting because it was a revelation to me, because Morgan Housel said that luck and risk are really both similar outcomes, the reality of how life is guided by forces other than your own personal efforts. And in fact, he said luck and risk are very similar. You can't in some ways have one without the other. Most of these things, luck and risk, happen because the world is too complex to allow your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes, Mark.
Yeah, I think that's right, Michael. I mean, they're driven by the same thing in lots of ways. If you look at it, so the accidental impact of actions outside of your control can be more consequential than the ones you actually do take. What he's really saying there is that the line between, say, inspiringly bold and foolishly reckless is actually very, very small. Isn't
it? That's right. So I guess he was getting at that luck and risk are doppelgangers. And in the same chapter, he was saying, well, be careful who you praise, be careful who you admire. Also, be careful who you look down upon, because it could easily be you. Some of those people who've been successful, and particularly in property, a couple of years ago when you could buy almost anything and the property values increased. A-grade properties did well, but so did ones on main roads in secondary locations. It made a lot of people look successful when in fact I'd maybe call them politely lucky idiots. They just happened to be in the right place at the right time and didn't even realise it. So don't necessarily just admire people because they've done well. Look behind the curtains and see what's going on there. And the other point he made, quote from that chapter, was go out of your way to find humility when things are going right, and also forgiveness and compassion when they're going wrong, because it's never as good or as bad as it looks, Mark.
No, it's a really good point, isn't it? I mean, I think, Michael, it's about looking at risk because it pays off over time, but then to avoid ruinous risk. Because what ruinous risk does, it prevents you from taking future risks that will also pay off over time.
That's right. So chapter 2 was about luck and risk, and that they're different ends of the spectrum, but very similar. Now, an interesting chapter to me, particularly over the last couple of years, is the concept of never enough. Because, to be blunt, for a long time in my life, I was chasing more. Somebody pointed out that when I was speaking to them, that they were addicted to success and keeping wanting to do more. But Morgan Housel said, life isn't any fun without a sense of enough. Happiness, as it's said in his book, is just results minus your expectation. So he was basically suggesting that you shouldn't think that enough is too little. Enough's actually realising the opposite. Having an insatiable appetite for more will sometimes push you to the point of regret. And I've discussed this in other podcasts. How do you know when you've had enough, when you've achieved enough? That's a difficult trait for somebody who's been chasing things for a long time.
Well, it is. And I think, Michael, that gets worse with social comparison as well, because when you and I were young, it's a long time ago, Michael.
Yeah.
But you know what? We would see somebody who was wealthy, for example, by the fact that we might drive past a very big house. Or I remember I was actually just sharing with Caroline this morning. We were talking about air conditioning in cars, and I remember when I was a kid, growing up in Brisbane in summer, it was hot. They were vinyl seats. The only air conditioning was wind the window down. But if a wealthy person drove past in a big car with their windows up, they had air conditioning. But these days, social comparison is so easy. It's everywhere. It's all over the internet. It's all over Facebook and social media, Instagram and TikTok and all of those sorts of things. So I think the point is that I think the ceiling of social comparison is so high that no one ever really hits it.
Interesting. I think one of the other things that happens, a difficult financial skill, is getting your goalpost to stop moving. And that's an important skill, though, because if your expectations keep rising with the results that you've achieved, there's really no logic in striving for more, because as soon as you achieve the next set of goals, all you're going to do is raise the bar again. And it gets dangerous when the taste for having more money, more power, more prestige increases your ambition faster than your satisfaction. You've got to enjoy life. And it's one of the things we personally have spoken about over the last year, when a number of people we know well have had health problems, other issues, and it just means that you've got to sit back each day and be grateful for what you've got.
Yeah, you do. And I think it was Morgan Housel, Michael, who said there's no reason to risk what you have and need to get what you don't have and don't need.
Interesting, yes. That's a really, really good point. Okay, chapter 4 of his book, The Psychology of Money, was called Confounding Compounding. But most investors understand the power of compounding. If something compounds and keeps growing, it serves for the fuel of future growth. You just got to keep compounding things. It's like those lilies on the lily pond, in the pond that they double and they double, and in the last time round, the whole pond sort of fills up. It's sort of logic defying. It's hard to understand, but lots written about Warren Buffett, who's made the vast majority of his multi-billion-dollar net worth after his 65th birthday. It's hard to fathom the power of compounding.
It is hard to fathom, but I think that the thing about that is to understand that the true secret or skill is actually time. Right? It's the most powerful thing you can do is to have an increased or a lengthy time horizon. I mean, that's how compounding works, which is why Warren Buffett's made so much of his money after 65. It's not because he suddenly stumbled across something on his 65th birthday that made him an extra $80 million. It was just the power of that compounding because of that long time frame.
How often do we hear investors say, gee, I wish I would have started 10 years, 20 years earlier? But there's always reasons not to do it, isn't there? The timing doesn't seem right. It's expensive. Other things get in the way. But a good investing in property or other areas isn't necessarily about earning the highest return, because the highest returns can sometimes be a one-off hit, as what happened in the boom a couple of years ago, or finding the next hotspot. Really, the best investors that we deal with at Metropole earn good returns, satisfactory returns, but stick with it and repeat with it over the long time, and that's when compounding runs wild.
Oh, and Michael, certainly in property, I mean, you and I have had this conversation lots of times where we've seen people that buy in the hot spot. They buy in a mining town. They buy in something that, and for 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 2 years, they do exceptionally well. Whereas if they had stuck with, the idea of the properties, the sort of properties that we buy, and just allowed that to compound, they'd be much better off in the long run.
Yes. Chapter 5 in Morgan Housel's book was Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. And he said there's a million ways of getting wealthy, but in Morgan Housel's view, there's only one way of staying wealthy, and that's a combination of frugality and paranoia. And when I first read this, I wasn't sure that he was right, but over the years, as I've noticed, a lot of people, whether it's in their property portfolio or building businesses, they start off well, and then all of a sudden, something goes wrong, they lose it.
I like that idea of frugality and paranoia, but what did he say? Good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions, but it's about consistently not screwing it up?
That's true, I guess, because you're never going to get it all right. So I don't think he's suggesting that you should always be right, but just be consistent. I mean, when you first start off, getting money, building a portfolio, requires taking risks, being optimistic, putting yourself out there, taking on debt, delayed gratification, doing the hard things now to have an easier life later. But once you've built it, then what you should be doing is not taking as much risk. And that's one of the things I've noticed when each year the Australian Financial Review brings out their list of the richest people in Australia, the top 200 list. They, early in the piece, have taken significant risks to build their business, and then they stop taking risks. We see this with business people as well. Oh, by the way, one of the interesting things in that list is that many of them have become wealthy in property, and others who haven't done it through property, have done it through business, they tend to invest the spoils of their business in property, Mark.
Yeah, exactly. It's about survival, isn't it? I mean, it's about being able to stick around for a long time without being wiped out or being forced to give up. And I think that's what makes the biggest difference, Michael.
Well, I think it's also, if you have a plan, and our listeners would know that the team at Metropole put together strategic property plans for clients, it teaches you what to do, but it also tells you what not to do. Sometimes when you build a successful property investment portfolio, you suddenly develop hubris and you think, oh, I'm invincible and I can do anything. And they start taking unnecessary risks. But Mark, you also, apart from your role as looking after the team at Metropole as the CEO, still act as my business coach and business coach to some very successful business people in Australia. And I think you'd see much the same thing, that sometimes we get a bit carried away with our own success or importance.
Yeah, they do. And I think the thing is, there's a couple of things, and there's great similarities between property investing and running a business. And one of those is that the importance of planning. But the other thing is just that survival mentality. So that you don't listen to your own PR essentially, because there's a
drink your own Kool-Aid is the expression.
That's it. Yeah.
People think they're unbreakable.
That's right.
And that's not the truth.
Right. Well, it's the opposite of survivability, I think, is if you think you're unbreakable, then, I've used this before, I like to think of it as in terms of, was it the Greek god Icarus who escaped from prison by creating wings of wax and then flew into the sun?
So business people have similar problems. Now, by the way, if you are a professional or a business person and you're enjoying my chat with Mark has his own podcast that's very successful also. And I enjoy, even though, Mark, I speak to you 3-4 times a day and we talk in different capacities, including you still coach the team. I love the lessons from the Mastermind for Business podcast. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, just go to Mark's podcast if you're in business, in a professional practice, or looking at getting in business, or just generally wanting to understand how you can, I guess, get more income but still end up having a bit more time. I guess that's also the theme for Mastermind Business Accelerator, Mark.
Yeah, it is, Michael. It's really about time and freedom. I mean, we talk about time in compounding in this chat, but I was just saying in a podcast episode I recorded the other day that time is the one commodity you can't get back. You can lose money and you can make money. You can lose friends and you can repair relationships, or you can make new friends. But time is that one commodity that when it's gone, it's gone. And so, as much as time is a vital ingredient in investing, getting that time back is also a vital thing in life. So that's what we do, is we help people to get that time back, so they're not as chained to their business.
Well, if you'd like to share the same business coach as I do, I'll leave a link in the show notes and have a chat with Caroline, who can find out what you're looking for, explain to you whether we are able to help, and if so, Mark, I'd love to have a chat with you about that. So we were talking about getting wealthy and staying wealthy, and they're very different things. The next chapter in Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, was called Tails You Win. What he was saying was, it wasn't, I thought, heads and tails, but I think he was really talking about the long tail. A lot of things in business and investing work that way. Long tails, the farthest end of distribution outcomes, have tremendous influence in finance, where a small number of events account for the majority of outcomes. So I guess it's almost the opposite of the 80-20 rule. You've got to do the things that are important, but there's also other things that if you stay in business, stay in investing, are going to make a difference too.
Yeah, I think one of the things we always say in business, especially Michael, is that it's those small tweaks. It's the little things that you do. So I think it was Morgan Housel said that a good definition of an investing genius is the man or woman who can do the average thing when all those around them are going crazy.
Yes, that's true. Okay, well, interestingly, his next chapter fits in a bit with what you were saying a couple of minutes ago, and it was about freedom. And he said the ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. That's the highest dividend money can pay.
Yeah, I mean, the highest form of wealth, I think, is the ability to wake up in the morning and say, I can do what I want today. Now, you know, people want to become wealthy. I've not think I've met anybody, Michael, who wanted to become wealthy for wealth's sake.
No.
People want to become wealthy to make them happier. I mean, happiness is such a complicated subject, though, isn't it? So
Everyone's different.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the common denominators, though, is the ability to have time and control.
People want choices in their life, don't they?
Yeah, what you do, and that's why you look to become wealthy, not for wealth's sake alone.
So it's more than your salary or the size of your home or your property portfolio. I think people are wanting control, especially over the last couple of years where maybe it started with COVID, where we felt the government was controlling us more, external elements were controlling us, things were out of our life. I think money's greatest intrinsic value, and it can't be overstated, is its ability to give you control over your time. I've often said any problem money can solve isn't really a problem. I remember a couple of months ago, Saturday morning, I got in the shower and it was cold. The hot water wasn't working, and it's actually, I think, the first time in my adult life I had a cold shower, and that's not the opening for a joke, Mark. And the first thing I did was ring Larry from Focus Plumbing and basically say, I know it's Saturday, I know it's after hours, I want a hot water service, and I want it today. And the plumber was out within an hour. I was impressed. Reese delivered a hot water service, and I didn't really have to think, how much is it going to cost? I didn't have to think, it's after hours, should I wait for Monday and have 2 more cold showers or not? So money gave me control of what I can do and what I want to do. It also gives me control of the people I want to be with. And I guess in that way, it does make you happy.
Yeah, it does. It's interesting, Michael, because you look at you know, I was thinking that the concept of wealth and control isn't about, it's about changing what you do, but on your terms. You know, so it doesn't mean stop working. I mean, you know, you're at the age and the time in your life, etc., where you could stop working if you want to, but that's actually not what it's about. It's about doing the work you want to do with the people you like to do at the times you want to do it, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, and that's really what I think wealth does for you. It buys that flexibility and that control.
Sure. So I guess the concept of money and wealth is giving you freedom in life. Mark, chapter 8 in Morgan Housel's great book was about the paradox in the man in the car. In other words, many of us want to drive in fancy cars, not just to impress ourselves, but to impress others. But Morgan Housel said, no one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are.
Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox here, though, Michael, isn't it? Because people we tend to want wealth to signal to other people that we should be liked and admired.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in reality, those other people often bypass admiring us, not because they don't think that wealth is admirable, but because the person they're looking at, they use their wealth as a benchmark for their own desire to be liked and admired.
That's right. And this goes back to what you were saying before a bit about social media and setting expectations.
Yep. And like we see it all the time. I mean, obviously we see it in the property space, certainly in the business space. I was sharing with somebody the other day, there was a business coach who used to record videos in the back of an extremely prestigious car. until somebody found that it was, his cousin was actually a salesperson at the car dealership, and all of those videos were shot in the back of a car on the showroom floor. I think that we've got to be really careful about what we hope that others will see in us because of what we own or what we drive or where we live or what we wear.
So others really don't care as much about us and what we wear and what we drive as we think they do.
No.
That's, again, something on social media because we're actually looking at other people. It's really more to judge where should I be and what's going on.
Well, I think it's that the humility, kindness, and empathy is going to bring you more respect than horsepower ever will. Now, having said that, it's still nice to drive a nice car.
It is, isn't it? We're both lucky enough to do that. But interestingly, the last chapter of his book that I want to discuss in this episode of the Michael Yardney Podcast says that wealth is what you don't see. Now, that's interesting. What Morgan Housel said is spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to lose money. He says that we tend to judge wealth by what we see because of the information they've got in front of us. We don't see their bank accounts, their mortgages. We don't see what challenges they've got. What we look at instead, as I've said a few times in the past, is the highlight reels rather than what's on the cutting room floor. We look at their cars, their homes, what's happening on Instagram at the moment. A lot of it helps people fake it until, well, maybe until they make it, but most of the time they don't.
No, often it's interesting because there was that saying about, it's faking it till you make it. But I think with a lot of those things, it's just faking it and it's never actually making it. So I think the point that Morgan was saying is that the truth is wealth is often what we don't see, right? So it's the things that aren't purchased, the car's not purchased, the diamond's not bought, the watch is not worn, etc. It's the assets that haven't been converted into the stuff you see. It's really difficult to contextualize what you can't see, though, Michael.
That's true. So he said wealth is what you don't spend, what you've saved. I think he also differentiated rich from wealthy. Rich is what your current income is. You may be driving a car, you may have a good income, but wealth is hidden. It's the income that's not spent. It's an option not yet taken. It gives you the ability to buy things later. And as we've said a bit earlier on, it also isn't the physical things, is it? It's the time, it's the relationships, it's the health. True wealth, and we talk about that a lot at Wealth Retreat, is to be truly wealthy, you need money, but more than just money. You need money plus your health, otherwise it's no good. You need money plus time to appreciate it. You need money plus people to love you and you to love people, your family and your friends. In my mind, you need the money plus the ability to keep learning, keep growing, keep improving. Money plus spirituality, and that means different things to different people. So true wealth is not just about money. And when we get together on the Gold Coast in April 2024, at the end of April, for Wealth Retreat, we actually find that people who are already very successful in business and entrepreneurship understand that wealth is more than that. Having said that, if you're an outsider and looked in, you may wonder, what are these already wealthy people who drive nice cars and got big portfolios of successful business people? What are they doing? Are they greedy, sitting there in a room with other wealthy people wanting to get more? And in my mind, the answer is they're not. They're just wanting to improve themselves. And they find that you can learn so much from the internet, you can learn so much from blogs or podcasts, but it's not the same as sitting in a room having breakfast, lunch and dinner with other people.
Well, the other thing that I always admire about Wealth Retreat, Michael, is that whilst the people are there are already successful, and in some ways they're there so that they can learn to be even more successful, but they're also learning how they can share that success. And so you often see people bringing family members along, bringing their adult children along. Because it's really about how they can do more in the world as well. There's an awful lot of philanthropy that goes on within that Wealth Retreat room as well.
Well, one of the things I left out in my list of what true wealth is also the ability to pass it on to other generations. And I know that at Metropole, we've run a charity ball in a number of years and we're going to do it again. And you've got some great initiatives about homelessness and other areas. So true wealth is, I think when you get to a particular level, your responsibility is to help other people get up there as well, Mark.
Yeah. And I guess the last thing about that too, Michael, is that the problem is that people are really good at learning by imitation. And so the real risk is that you end up imitating the wrong people. You imitate those highlight reels that you were talking about before, the people who are actually faking it and not making it. Again, it's just a reminder about being super careful about where you get your advice and who it is that you imitate.
So, question to the people listening to this, is your peer group the right people to get you to the next level? In fact, what you've done up to now may not get you to the next level. Otherwise, you'd already be there. So if you're keen to get into a room of already successful movers and shakers, why not look at wealthretreat.com.au? I'll leave a link in the show notes and inquire. Leave your details, because I speak to everybody who's keen to come to make sure it's right for you and that you're going to benefit from it. And by the way, if I choose for you to be able to come, I'm prepared to back myself. So test me out. See if you would be able to benefit from Wealth Retreat as well. Now, Mark, we covered a lot from Morgan Housel's book, but we've got to now finish up this particular podcast and come back again next time for the next 9 chapters.
Yeah. Looking forward to that, Michael.
Thanks, Mark.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my mindset moment today, I want to discuss with you a self-destructive habit that you must leave behind if you want more success. Look, there are many bad habits that hinder your goals, whether it's personal goals, relationship goals, investment goals. But according to Simon Sinek, a best-selling author and leadership expert, he said the most self-destructive habit is so common you may not even realize how much it's damaging you. He said, as human beings, we can't help but compare ourselves with others, and comparison is the deadliest thing we can do to ourselves because we're always going to come up short, according to Sinek. All it does is exaggerate all our insecurities. Now, he says it's okay to enjoy other people's success, but you let them live their lives and you should live your life. Oh, and by the way, if you don't know, they're curating their social media. What you're seeing is the highlight reels, not all the bit on the cutting room floor. What you're seeing on social media is not really their life. So you're making decisions. You're getting your thoughts and ideas based on their curated life. So Sinek suggests to avoid falling into this circle of depression, as he calls it, he suggests a few tips to reframe your thinking. First of all, look at your peers and as a source of inspiration, not competition. Forget the tall poppy syndrome that we have in Australia that doesn't seem to occur in other parts of the world. If somebody else is doing well, fantastic, great. It also means you can. Number 2, he said, take pride in the things you're good at instead of dwelling on the areas that need improvement. I've found a lot of people are in so much of a hurry to get somewhere that they're wanting to achieve the goals, they've actually lost track of how far they've already come. So just look back, what was your life like 5-10 years ago, and look where you are today. And then the third comment that Simon Sinek said about how to overcome this, what he called circle of depression, where you've got this self-destructive habit of looking at other people, he said, lean on your inner circle for support and reassurance. Now, that's really, really important, isn't it? The people you hang around, I guess, ends up being the way you become. You know, they've often said you become like the 5 people that you hang around with the most. So make sure that you're in a peer group of positive, aspirational thinkers, people who want you to do well, not people who look for problems and faults. Pessimists never become wealthy. So, some great lessons from leadership expert Simon Sinek. Well, thanks for spending the last little while with me, and I hope you got some benefit from this show. If you did, and you know somebody else who'd also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney Podcast. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there's 3 little buttons down the bottom. Press it and share it, or just tell them about the Michael Yardney Podcast. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you'll definitely be doing me a favour and helping me in my quest to make as many people as possible financially literate. Now, there's ways of catching up with me between these shows. Just look for Michael Yardney on social media, or why not join my private Facebook group, go to Facebook and look for the Property Update Facebook group. And I have a way of saying thank you to you for subscribing to this podcast. Go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where you can get a bunch of ebooks and reports. My way of saying thank you. And when you've got time, why not listen to some of the old podcasts? There's individual lessons in each of those that I think would be helpful for you. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney Podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney Podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?